If you live on the internet, odds are you've heard of something called Godwin's Law. For most of you who somehow avoided the inescapable hell of being addicted to Twitter and Facebook, here's a quick rundown. In the early days of the internet, a Texas attorney named Mike Godwin jokingly said that as any online argument continues, the likelihood of someone comparing someone else to Hitler approached 100%. And by doing so, they immediately lost the argument. Note that this was back in the 1990s when people thought Nazis were just Raiders of the Lost Ark villains who were about as likely to return to prominence as, saying having a real-life Toontown like the one in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Why couldn't we have gotten a Toontown in 2016? Instead, that would have been great. At least dropping pianos in people is, funny. And hey, it doesn't kill them. It just, leaves little birds around their heads. Anyway, like any other internet joke, people took Godwin's Law way too seriously and applied it to literally everything. Will women ever make the same wage as their male counterparts under the Equal Pay Act? Shut up, lady, you're a Nazi! Oh, how do we get clean water back to Flint? Nazi! Is a hot dog really a sandwich? Sandwiches are part of the deep state, and hot dogs are Hitler. The internet is fun. So now, when you call the internment facilities where immigrant children are being kept separate from their families and forced to sleep on the floor, concentration camps, someone is sure to try to shut you up by claiming Godwin's Law. There should probably be a law about the likelihood of people invoking Godwin's Law, so let's just set aside the fact that Godwin himself has said those detention centers are in fact concentration camps, okay, and they definitely are. And let's back away from Germany entirely. Let's talk about these detention centers through the lens of our own history on immigration, which you may not be aware of, fucking sucks. There are an awful things you've probably heard of, like Japanese internment camps and during World War II, and the forced immigration of slavery, right? I want to talk about something you may not have heard of, the anti-immigration scare of the 1920s. Here's how non-profit educational organization Khan Academy described the time. Many rural Americans reacted to the rapid social changes of modern urban society with a vigorous defense of religious values and fearful rejection of cultural diversity and equality. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? And where was the cultural diversity coming from? Mexico? Honduras? Nah. People didn't care about those countries back then. They were right next to us, like our neighbors. Who could ever be mad at them? Yeah, back in the 1900s and 1910s, they were coming from Europe. In particular, Polish and Italian immigrants were hustling it out of there because of the instability of the region after World War I and the Russian Revolution. The Bolsheviks were kind of like the MS-13 of the period, right? So now, you may be saying, Polish and Italian, but my aunt, uncle, grandma is of Polish and or Italian descent. And yeah, my nonna came right off the boat from Calabria at Ellis Island. But back in those days, people hated Polish and Italian immigrants. Get this. A lot of people thought that immigrants coming from Europe were criminals who wanted to kill them, even though just about all of them were trying to escape violence. Polish and Italian immigrants were often compared to, you didn't guess it, rats. Sound familiar? Yeah. It got so bad that Congress eventually passed the Emergency Immigration Act of 1921, which limited the number of immigrants that could come to the U.S. from other countries in Southern and Eastern Europe. It got even worse when the amendment in 1924, which excluded Asian immigrants. It was, and I'm searching for the right words here because it's hard, an immigration ban of sorts. The first Immigration Act was signed into law by President Warren G. Harding, which, let's talk about him for a minute. He's widely regarded as the most corrupt president in U.S. history, at least before Nixon. It's like you've heard this before! Though he wasn't born into money, Harding was pretty rich when he got elected to office. He cut taxes for the wealthy, he didn't want to join the League of Nations, and he wanted to collect money from U.S. allies. He had several known extramarital affairs. He did everything he could to help big business over workers. He appointed his friends to cabinet positions. The Veterans Bureau director went basically to prison for stealing money meant for building hospitals. His administration took bribes from oil companies. He couldn't eat McDonald's for every meal yet. If it was around, I bet he would. But also Harding gave speeches about racial equality and talked about administering these laws humanely. So he was comparatively woke to today's presidential standards. What a bar to hit. It was Calvin Coolidge, his successor, who said America must be kept American when he signed the 1924 Amendment into law. And that law didn't change until 1968. It lasted more than 40 years. But here's the thing, though. Those un-American Polish and Italian immigrants who have been kept out, we think of them as entirely American now, or, let me rephrase, white. One of them, again, was my Nonna, who managed to escape and get in despite the quotas. She managed to earn a degree in education and picked up a third language, Spanish, because she said it was useful. Yeah, she wouldn't totally talk about what it was like to settle in a new country. Maybe because she saw some really weird shit in 1939 go down, and they were like, peace, we gotta go. This is about to get really bad. These immigrants spoke Italian and Polish and Japanese then. The people and children in those detention centers, or let's be honest, concentration camps, speak Spanish. They're suffering through a greatest hits of our worst immigration impulses as a nation, rampant nativism and fear-driven internment camps, concentration camps. Some of us haven't even learned from our own history. Let's hope someone who has learned something doesn't punish people who don't deserve it another 40 years.